So to you, if anyone's listening and you're shipping those pills into Texas to kill little babies and to hurt moms, let me make this clear. In Texas, we will bankrupt you. That's what this bill does.
Dear Jane Time, I'm Scott. She's Marcie. Great one today. We're going to talk about a pace-setting law that has been passed in Texas that we hope is replicated across the country.
I love seeing creative pieces of legislation. You can tell the legislators are not just going through the motions like, hey, I ran on a pro-life platform, I better throw together some pro-life legislation, and then at least I can say I tried. Yep. You can really tell, and you're going to hear the level of thought and effort and intentionality and creativity that went into a couple of recent pieces of recent legislation in the state of Texas that is having a real impact on lives being saved.
Yeah, and the problem they're trying to solve with this most recent one is going after people who are manufacturers that are sending the abortion pill into states where it's illegal. And for a while, we've been saying, well, what can we do about it? Well, Texas has come up with a pretty creative solution. So we're going to talk about that today with Senator Bryan Hughes. But before we get to Senator Hughes, you should know, people who listen to this and people who are pro-life won't be surprised to hear that getting out the pro-life message versus big tech and the algorithms and things like that is not easy. You can help us in that fight by supporting us, dearjane.org. You'll see if you go to dearjane.org, there's a support button there. If you're able to give anything, it will help us spread the word to more people, fight through these algorithms, that kind of thing, because we're starting to gain momentum. We're starting to set the pace in terms of conversation and things like that. So I know we're going to do it with today's. So we would just encourage people to go to dearjane.org, click support, and help us out. It would be fantastic.
And if you haven't yet, go to YouTube, go to wherever you're listening to this. Make sure you're subscribed. Sometimes when you listen to a couple of episodes of a show, YouTube just keeps showing it to you, but you may or may not be subscribed. So make sure you're actually subscribed. Show some love on social media, share our reels. Our content team does a great job putting those out. We'd love to have you help spread the word that way as well.
Yep, appreciate you doing that. Senator Bryan Hughes from Texas joins us today on Dear Jane. So a very creative solution coming out of Texas, very just a strong idea that has been implemented into law down there in Texas. Senator Hughes, thanks for joining us here today. What was your motivation behind this bill?
Texas has led on a lot of pro-life legislation, helping babies, helping moms. That's important to us. And we realize that for all the success the pro-life movement has had, there's a growing problem where these pills are being mailed directly to moms who maybe go online, maybe call a number, or as you know, which maybe we'll talk about if you want to, where a boyfriend or a pimp or someone else slips this in food or in a drink. But the point is, moms are suffering. Obviously, little babies are being killed, and moms are suffering and in some cases dying. And because of the way these were coming in, it was difficult. This is illegal. Doing an abortion on a little baby in Texas using those pills is illegal, but it is difficult for us to get to the folks who are shipping those pills in. Obviously, we don't prosecute moms. As you know, there are two victims. There's that little baby, and there's that mom who's been lied to, coerced, given false information, no telling. We in Texas, we want to continue to show that we can save the life of that little baby while we love and support and respect that mom. And so we wanted to find a way to go after the people, big pharma in many cases, the people who are sending these poisonous pills into Texas illegally, and go after them. And we believe, by God's grace, this is a solution that's going to work.
I love how creative y'all have been in Texas, starting with the Heartbeat Act that passed a few years ago now, and now HB 7. Talk to us about where that idea came from, kind of the inspiration behind these two.
Thank you so much. I was honored to carry the Heartbeat Law back in 2021, and I know you know and your listeners know, it was the first pro-life law that the Supreme Court allowed to stand since Roe, and so it was a real encouragement. I'm a lawyer, I practice law, but I had some really smart people involved. At first, he wanted to be kind of quiet about it because didn't want the the credit or the notoriety, but a lawyer named Jonathan Mitchell, very sharp lawyer, clerked for Justice Scalia on the Supreme Court. He was our Solicitor General in Texas. He and I got to be friends, worked together then, and he came up with the idea of using private citizen enforcement. You guys know how it works. A state passes a pro-life law. It's enforced by the state, of course. So some pro-abortion group sues the state to block implementation of the law, and the law doesn't take effect, or if it does take effect, it's after years of court battles. We wanted to find a way to put a pro-life law in effect day one and let it begin saving lives. Of course, there is judicial review, but we did not want a pre-enforcement challenge, a pre-enforcement block of the law. And so, with the heartbeat law, it was enforced not by the state of Texas, not by the medical board, not by the attorney general or the DA, but by private citizens. So any person can bring suit against a doc, not a mom, but against a doc performing an illegal abortion. So if you want to sue, if you're a pro-abortion group, you want to sue to block that law taking effect, who do you sue? You can't sue every Texan for an injunction to stop them from bringing the suit. So we knew this would work on paper. We were nervous as to what the Supreme Court might do. And so back in September of 21, we passed the law in the spring, took effect September 1st, and we were waiting to see what would happen. And when the Supreme Court allowed that law to stand, we were obviously overjoyed. And then we'd been thinking, now that this law is in effect, where are we going to file our first lawsuit against abortionists who are killing little babies? And we didn't file a lawsuit because they stopped doing illegal abortions. The law worked better than we had dreamed it would. And so many smart people worked and prayed, and God blessed. And so that was about a year before, as you know, before Roe fell. We're so thankful for Mississippi and for their law that the Supreme Court used to do in Roe versus Wade. So that was we realized that using the litigation process, the court system, this is in our Constitution. It's there for a reason. And I'm not going to get too political, but allow me to speak right versus left for a moment. Historically, the left is a whole lot better at using the courts, even abusing the courts. Conservatives tend to shy away from that. And yes, we tend to get outlawyered. Well, no more. No more. The Constitution is there for a reason. The trial by jury is there for a reason, and that third branch matters. And so we can appropriately and effectively and aggressively use that to save little babies and to protect people's rights. And so that was how the heartbeat law worked. And then similarly, with House Bill 7, what became House Bill 7, to do something about those poisonous pills. I know you already know this, but I had to go back and look at what had happened. As you know, some of your listeners are old enough to remember RU 486, and that during the Clinton years, that abortion pill, originally that regimen that was developed. And so originally, you know this, of course, there were multiple doctor visits required, have in-person visits before. The drug could only be administered in the doctor's office. But between Obama administration, Biden administration, and COVID-19, no in-person doctor visits, not even a doctor required to prescribe it. And instead of a doctor's office, you know what happens. The mom, this often scared, lied to mom, takes these pills at home and goes through that unspeakable process, which we have to talk about. So that we knew we had to do something. And so, again, we're not after that mom. We are after that pimp, that boyfriend, that person lying to her and slipping that in her drink. Unless people think that's urban legend, we have someone prosecuted, convicted in Texas for that very act. A dear lady from Louisiana, whom I know and who I've known her family for a while, was a victim of that. There are other documented cases. And of course, these people that are mailing these pills and telling moms, oh, it's like taking an Advil, it's like taking a Tylenol. Oh my goodness. So we knew we had to do something, and we realized that we could use the court system to go after those people. They understand money. They understand money. So the message to us, the message we are sending to them, so to you, if anyone's listening and you're shipping those pills into Texas to kill little babies and to hurt moms, let me make this clear. In Texas, we will bankrupt you. That's what this bill does.
I love that. And, I love also how you pointed out, and I think it's worth remembering, we always kind of lament how the other side is very, let's say, creative, and they do have smart people, but you know what? We do too. And it does require some creativity and adaptation as we go to respond to the nonsense that the other side does. So you kind of touched on it there at the end. Excuse me, sorry. So let's say you're one of these doctors or nurses or whatever. Let's say you're in California or something like that. What, in a practical terms, how might this affect you if you want to try to get this pill to a woman or to anybody?
Great question. So under this law, if you ship that pill to Texas with the intent of performing an illegal abortion, you're liable. If you're caught doing that, if anyone realizes you're doing that, they can sue you in a court in Texas. Whether that pill makes it to a mom, whether it takes the life of a baby or not. If it takes the life of a baby, you are liable for a suit for wrongful death. If it harms the mom, you are liable in a suit for personal injury, and heaven forbid if the mom dies, for wrongful death. So, as you know, the concept of product liability. If you manufacture a car in Detroit and it's unsafe, it's defective, it ends up in Texas. Even though you've never been to Texas and you made the car in Michigan, we can sue you in Texas under the theory of products liability. And the Supreme Court has recognized that under long arm jurisdiction, if you make a product, a dangerous product, and inject it into the stream of commerce, you can be held liable in any court in America where that product ends up, where it's reasonable to expect it's going to end up. So clearly, that applies if you're mailing those pills directly into Texas. They thought, since they were in New York, California, they were out of reach of our courts. They may be out of reach of our criminal courts, but they are not out of reach of our civil courts. So just like a dangerous product manufactured somewhere else and shipped here, they're held liable for, the same applies here. And so that's the first step. As you know, some states like California, New York, Illinois have passed shield laws where they say we're going to protect our doctors who are trying to kill babies in Texas or in other pro-life states. And they can try that. We've already had a couple of cases where our attorney general going after abortionists in other states have sued them in Texas state court and gotten a judgment against them. But it's been difficult to enforce that judgment in other states because of those shield laws. That's why we took this approach with House Bill 7. We took a products liability approach because this is tried and true. It is well known if your dangerous product harms someone in a state you ship it to, you can be held liable. So that's the theory. That's why we believe it's going to work.
I love that.
That's interesting. I was going to ask you about shield laws, so I'm glad you addressed that. I will share. So I've been involved in pro-life political activism in Colorado for many years now. And I remember when you guys passed the Heartbeat Act, the Heartbeat Law, the abortion movement in Colorado went kind of wild because they thought, okay, now women in Texas, it's going to be harder for them to get abortions there. Let's open up the floodgates. Let's welcome them into Colorado. Public funds were set up to help fund women's travel to Colorado from Texas for their abortions. Have y'all been able to gauge how many women maybe have left the state for their abortions in the last few years? Is there any mechanism there? I guess I'm just curious what your thoughts are when it comes to what we call abortion tourism, women leaving states for other abortions. Do you have any numbers? Do you have ideas of how to kind of...
It's a real issue. We do know Texas has robust abortion reporting statutes. Early in the pro-life movement, we got that in place in Texas just to know what's happening and where and to whom and demographics. Not individual. The data is anonymized, of course, but we know a lot about those abortions in Texas. We know that they went down dramatically after the Heartbeat Law was passed. We have other states that don't have as good reporting requirements, but there's some data. We know that New Mexico increased. And so there is certainly evidence that, and even some moms have even said publicly and in the litigation that they brought for other reasons, there is evidence that moms in many cases have left Texas to get abortions in other states. We had some of our more anti-baby jurisdictions, some of our cities and counties that were actually putting up money to fund moms to travel to other states to take the lives of their little babies. And so we did make that a crime. And so in Texas, I say a crime, no government money, no local, state, county, no government money can be used to fund abortion travel. Obviously, we have not passed any laws that affect an individual's right to travel. We haven't done that. But as far as the government funding it on the Texas side, that is not happening. And something else we've done, I'm sorry if I'm jumping ahead, but I know you guys care about all these things, but something we've done that you guys have talked about, and you've done in other states, that the traditional media never, ever wants to hear about, and that's funding of our Alternatives to Abortion program. When we passed the heartbeat law, we double funding for that. We've added it. We're up to a couple $100 million now, and we're always accused. They say, "Well, you're not pro-life. You're just pro-birth because you don't care about them when they're born." And we understand that argument. And so, to make sure there's no question about that, the Alternatives to Abortion program in Texas, it helps that mom while she's pregnant with prenatal care, help that she needs there, and then once the baby comes along, parenting classes, diapers, baby clothes, baby formula, help with job placement, rent assistance. We want to really help that mom and help that baby, and so we've also beefed that up in Texas each time we passed a pro-life law. We changed the name. We realized after the heartbeat law and after Roe, maybe we shouldn't call it Alternatives to Abortion. Now it's called the Thriving Texas Families Program, but it's the same. But it's for moms and babies, moms with difficult or unplanned pregnancies. So yes, we lament what other states are doing, but we're trying to make sure Texas is a safe place for babies and for moms.
Go ahead. Sorry, Marcie.
I was just going to say, I love that because you've alluded to this, but so many women are lied to, especially when they are in such a vulnerable position. And there have been studies that have indicated that many women, I think over 60% of women, have said if they had had support, if they had had help, they wouldn't have gone through with the abortion. So I love that you're not just in the state of Texas saying no more abortions, but you're saying, and actually we're going to help support you even more as you give life to your baby, as you start your family, no matter the circumstances of starting that family. I just love that. And I think that's it could be such a model and a blueprint for a lot of other states.
We're encouraged. Texas began that, really, Texas Right to Life was the spearhead behind that years ago. I was in the Texas House and got to work on that. And we did a couple of things after we started that program. Once we fully defunded Planned Parenthood, we took some of the money that had gone to Planned Parenthood and sent it to that program to help moms and to help babies. So that was real money and also kind of poetic. We thought that was important, and so there's work to be done, but we're trying to get there. And I should say something unpleasant, but I know you know this, and I know your listeners are sophisticated and pay attention. But I didn't know until I began to study exactly what these abortion pills do, what they are. We talked about a mom being alone taking them, but I know you know this, but if you don't mind my going into the mechanics just a little bit, that mom gets these pills in the mail, sometimes with no instruction, literally no instruction. Maybe the number they called told them what to do. Maybe there's something on a website. But y'all know what happens. That first pill, it starves the little baby, right? It denies nutrients to that little baby. And so then after the way it's supposed to work, after that little baby is gone, the mom takes the second pill, which expels the little now deceased unborn baby from her body. But we know one of the reasons that they used to require in-person office visits is because if a mom has an ectopic pregnancy, and she has no way of knowing without going to the doc, if a mom has an ectopic pregnancy and takes that pill, she's putting herself in great danger. Or if her pregnancy is further along than she realizes, and with no doctor visit required, she may not know. So the little baby is more developed than she knew. And so she takes that first pill and then the second pill, and the little baby has developed too much. The mom is in grave danger. And again, forgive me for being so talking about this, but think of that mom who's alone in her bathroom, alone, and she's taking that first pill, takes that second pill, and even if the process works like it's supposed to, her little unborn baby is delivered there. It's an unspeakable situation. And we heard chilling testimony from moms who talked about how I was told to expect a little discomfort, a little pain. I had no idea what this was going to be involved in. I won't go into it. We shared some of it on the Senate floor, but just unspeakable what those moms are being put through. And uh, it's not pro woman. It's horrible. And so that's why we want to do everything we can to protect those moms and to go after these people. You know, you guys know about the history. So one of the main companies that makes these pills, Danco, they used to be called Popco, for population control. And they were amazing. And they were formed for the purpose of developing and marketing the abortion pill. Wow, what a great place to work, huh? Imagine that corporate culture. What would that be like? And so they changed their name to Danco. But this is what they do. They sell abortion pills. They distribute abortion pills. And so we are not going to let them or Big Pharma or anybody else kill little babies and prey on vulnerable moms in Texas. We're not going to let that happen.
You know, I appreciate the way you're talking about the mom. And you know, you talked about that, what happens at home. One of the things that resonated with me was somebody had put it this way: the bathroom becomes the abortion clinic for her. And everything associated with that, it's right there in her home. You know, it's so I totally get that. And this is it's off topic for House Bill 7, which I want to get back to. But speaking of moms, I'm sure you're aware of this. I'm sure you know that there's an effort now to prosecute women who might want to seek an abortion. I know that's crossed your radar. It's in legislatures all across the country. What's your take on
Thank you for bringing that up. A lot of folks in the pro-life movement, passionate people, that's who we all are. Those bills have been filed in Texas. They haven't gotten very far. And so let me just say, and I have deep respect for folks who see this differently, but let me just be very clear. In Texas, we recognize there are two victims, a little unborn baby and a mom, and we want to protect both of them. So you will not see the Texas Senate, you will not see me pushing legislation that's going to prosecute moms. That mom is a victim, and so she needs to be protected and given good information. But yes, that's bubbling up, and I get calls about that. And of course, I listen to people, and I don't have it all figured out. I always want to be humble. I want to be teachable. But we're not going after those moms. We are protecting those moms in Texas.
You mentioned how women are lied to, and so there have already been, I think, at least one suit where this is a case where men are sneaking the pill into a woman's drink. And so there have been suits under House Bill 7 already kind of related to that, right? Can you tell us a little bit about that? There
certainly have. And these cases are reported in the mainstream media, whatever you want to call it. During our debate on the Senate floor, someone suggested this was made up, so I read them the stories from CNN and from a big daily newspaper. Sadly, yes, there's one case with a dear lady in Houston who had roots in Louisiana, and her husband surreptitiously put this in her drink. She did not know. He was prosecuted for that. There's an ongoing case also in Texas where a boyfriend was pressuring his girlfriend to have an abortion. He didn't want to have the baby. She did. And he's accused and has been indicted for slipping those into her drink. Those are just two documented cases. And when we think about what's going on in our country with human trafficking and women being preyed upon and lied to, think of the power this gives to that pimp, to that devil who's holding that woman, using her for his own profit. For people that claim to be pro-women and pro-women's rights, it's shocking. It is shocking that they're not with us on this.
Well, it strikes me that the other side has so masterfully painted this as choice and as women's empowerment that then advocates for abortion they're not even open to the possibility of maybe a dark underbelly of the abortion industry, abortion pills, abortion procedures. So they're not willing to even, like the fact that you were accused of making up a story about a woman having these drugs slipped into her drink is like, well, women have drugs slipped into their drinks for all kinds of different drugs all the time. It's not outside of the realm of possibility or belief that this could happen with abortion as well. But I say all of that to say I think the mainstream culture has done such a good job of portraying abortion as this empowering women's choice, all those narratives that we're not even willing to consider. There are bad
Well
actors at play
said.
here.
Well said. And I'll say, and if this isn't off topic, I might mention something, and it may or not be something we want to go into. But while we're in this raw footage stage, I'll share it, and y'all can decide what you want to do if that's okay. As you know, after the heartbeat law, and then especially after Roe, there were stories around the country, and I think President Biden even had a lady as a guest at one of his State of the Union addresses, who said, "Oh, I want my husband. I want to have children, but we had this problem pregnancy, and we couldn't get an abortion, and it led to health challenges." And you've seen some of these stories and some of these cases, and so we looked back at that in Texas because ectopic pregnancies, for example, a number of the stories in the media are about moms with ectopic pregnancies who went to get treatment, went to the ER, and the hospital or the doc turned them away and said, "Oh, sorry, heartbeat law, pro-life law, we can't treat your ectopic pregnancy." Now, you guys know this, but let me just make sure we're clear about Texas law. The definition of abortion in Texas law, been there for decades, it specifically says removal of an ectopic pregnancy is not an abortion. Also with miscarriages, there have been stories about moms experiencing miscarriages. They go to the ER, go to the doc, and they won't treat them. Now, thankfully, this has not happened many times, but once is too many. And again, the definition of abortion in Texas, been there for decades, says removal of a miscarriage is not an abortion. Heartbeat law doesn't apply. None of our pro-life laws apply to those situations. Nevertheless, because of the media, because of the narrative out of the media, we had docs and hospitals that were confused about the law. And so different states handle this different ways. In Texas, we passed the Life of the Mother Act, Senate Bill 30. I was honored to carry that bill. We worked with the Medical Association, and they're usually not with us or against us or silent on pro-life bills, but they're good folks over there. But we worked with the Texas Medical Association. We worked with the Texas Hospital Association, and of course with our pro-life groups and our Catholic groups, and we came together and we looked at those definitions of abortion in the law, made sure they were crystal clear, clarified a couple, so that everybody agrees there's no question. When the mother's life is in jeopardy, of course, the physician can treat her. The mom has the right to move forward with that. And we got the hospital groups and the doctor groups on board, signing off on the language, putting out the word, and probably the best part of this bill, we require every doctor now that practices OB-GYN, that delivers babies, every doctor has to take a course on exactly what the law is, what it means, so that when that mom presents with an ectopic pregnancy or with a miscarriage or a truly life-threatening situation, so the doctor knows what the law is, first of all, that mom needs to be protected. And of course, you know how the left loves to take these stories and magnify them and blame pro-life laws for docs and hospitals not following the law. The good news is most docs and hospitals are getting it right. But there were a few cases in Texas that should not have happened. So we came together with for that matter, even pro-choice groups were supported what we did, making the law crystal clear, so there's no question. Now, different states took different approaches. That was kind of controversial. It may or may not be something you want to talk about, but we, by God's grace, everybody came together in Texas. We did not weaken one whit, but we made it clear. A life of the mother, again, that's a life of the mother is an exception that most pro-lifers agree with. You can make a biblical case, I believe, for the life of the mother exception. In any case, that may or may not be relevant for what we're doing today or ever, but I wanted to mention that since we're here and we're in the initial stage, and we're not going live on this right now.
No, I'm glad you brought that up because I had heard some of the stories or read some of the stories about hospitals and doctors refusing to treat women who had ectopic pregnancies, but I didn't hear the follow-up stories that you guys went back and clarified. And I love that there's been this follow-up. And if the other side were willing to open to listening and open to seeing what we're doing, they could see like, y'all are good actors. You really believe what you're doing. This is about the health of the women. So let's make sure that the hospitals know what they are supposed to do, what the law actually says. I love that y'all went back in and clarified. I wish that the mainstream media had reported on that part.
We do too.
So once upon a time, I was well immersed in the legislative process, and I know enough to know that it is, especially when it comes to state law, it can be a bit of a copycat business. We've certainly seen this on the other side, where a crazy law will be presented in New York or California, and it'll be replicated in Minnesota or Colorado, that sort of thing. Any chances? Have you heard anything about maybe other states checking into what you did with House Bill 7 and maybe trying to replicate?
Well, thank you.
that?
We have. Going back to the Heartbeat Bill, we worked with a lot of pro-lifers in other states and organizations. A new organization called the National Association of Christian Lawmakers is sharing pro-life model legislation. Of course, pro-life groups do. And so, yes, it happened on the Heartbeat Law. And yes, we've heard from, I think, 3 other states that are working on similar legislation. And of course, we believe in federalism, and the states are laboratories of democracy. We're going to learn things from other states, and we're going to improve the process. But that is definitely happening, and we're encouraged.
That's great.
Senator Bryan Hughes from Texas, really appreciate what you're doing there. Keep up the good work, and thanks for giving us
Honored
some
to be
time.
here. Thank y'all so much.